What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Demon Reads Comics. Today we're going to talk about one of the biggest books. Actually, it's a big book. It's one of the biggest books I've done a review on this channel so far. But it's a humongous series. So today we're going to look at Neil Gaiman's The Sandman Omnibus Volume 1. There are 3 omnibus, and this is just Volume 1 of this. And so let's talk about it. Like I said, it's by Neil. The story is by Neil Gaiman. And the art is actually by a whole bunch of other people, but most notably, Sam Keith, Mike Drenenberg. There's a whole bunch of others. When I flip through the book, you guys see, but there's a whole bunch of other people. Like I said, it's the Omnibus Edition, Volume 1. It is published by DC Comics, and it does have some beautiful sewn binding. This book was actually a little bit expensive, but then again, most omnibuses are. You can collect these books in trade paperbacks, in absolute, absolutes, hardcover editions, and omnibus. I decided to go down this route because of a specific reason. Because I believe if you get it like the hardcover editions, there's like 12 or something of them, and if you get the absolute editions, there's like 7 or 8 of them, and then the trade paperbacks is even more. And just who has that kind of room for it, right? Me personally, I don't even have that kind of room, and I'm not even, at the end of this, when I give this a rating, I'm not even going to talk about if I have the room for this or not. So anyway, let's go ahead and talk about this. Let's crack this open. I kind of want to talk about this, but it's kind of hard to talk about because if I talk about everything in it, I'll pretty much give the whole story away, which it's kind of pointless. But I do want to say there's different story arcs in here. I will talk about the first story arc, maybe the second story arc, and maybe another different story arc. But in a nutshell, I don't want to talk about too much stuff because then I would give away too many spoilers and what happened. So let's go ahead and crack this open and see what you guys think. Alrighty, guys, so here we go. Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. See, first and foremost, is it The Sandman or is it just called Sandman? Because here, let's crack this open. First and foremost, one of the other things I want to talk about this is because it's an omnibus and it's so big and heavy that the glue is starting to come apart right here, as you guys can notice it. I wasn't a big fan of that. It didn't start doing that until I started flipping through the pages and trying to read it, that this started coming apart. I don't know why it did that, but anyway, the reason I was asking if it's The Sandman or just Sandman, because the card cover, it says The Sandman, but right here it just says Sandman, Neil Gaiman, Volume 1. Anyway, so it's written by Neil Gaiman. As you can see here, it's illustrated by a whole bunch of people, most notably Sam Keith, Mike Drenenberg. But I don't want to take away from these other people right here. You guys can take, pause this and take a look at that. You got colors by Daniel Vozo, Steve Olive, Zinal, lettered by Tom Colleen, John Costanza, cover art by Dave McKean, and then featured characters by Neil Gaiman, Sam Keith, and Mike Drenenberg. There we go. And then it does give you a nice table of contents. And that's one thing I do like about omnibuses is that most, if not all omnibuses, give you a table of contents, which at times it makes sense and at other times it doesn't, because it gives you the page number. And this one does give you the page number at the bottom of the book, but some of them don't. So I don't know what the point of that is, but still. But anyway, it collects issues 1 through 37 and Sandman Special number 1. There's a total of 1,035 pages of this. 1,035, a big book. Now, one thing I do like about this is that every issue, they put the cover it right here. You know how most of the time when you read something, a hardcover, absolute, they might put the issues on the back. This one does not do that. This one gives you the issues right when the issue starts. And at the back, there really is just biography of the creators and the illustrators and things like that. So, anyway, enough about that. Let's talk about the story of The Sandman. So, what is the story of The Sandman? Well, The Sandman has to do with... It's kind of hard to talk about certain characters because these characters don't really matter, so to speak. But in a nutshell, this guy gives another guy a book. This book is a ritual on how to summon one of the endless. There are 7 endless. The endless are dream, death, despair, desire, destiny. There's 2 other ones. Hold on, Jesus. Death, dream, desire, despair, destiny, there's another one too. I just got done like looking it up. But anyway, there's 7 of them in total. Okay. And so this guy, he's part of a cult. He wants to summon death because he wants to be able to have the power to control death. And so he does this big, and hold on, I want to tell you guys this too. It started in 1916. Oh, you also get introduced to a few characters right here. A lot of these characters that you get introduced to, like especially like this one right here and this guy right here, I don't want to say they don't matter, but they put him in there so you know about him. The only person that you should really think about is the last person, Unity Kincaid, because she does come in later on. But this started in 1916. They do the ritual to try to summon death and capture death. Once they do the ritual, they summon somebody, but it's not death. It's actually Dream, the Dream Lord. His name is Morpheus, and they capture him and encapsulate him in like a crystal ball. And other people that you saw that were dreaming, they stay asleep, they wake up a little bit, and they stay asleep most of the time. This not only does happen to them, but it happens to a whole bunch of other people. And they stay asleep and they keep dreaming. Well, it's not until about 70 years later. This is cool real quick. This is a reference to the old Justice League. This is Wesley Dodds, the Sandman. He's part of the GLA, which is pretty cool. I first heard about him when I was reading through my very first comic book, Starman. You get introduced to him in there too, which is cool. So it's not until about I think it's right about here. Nope. No, actually, hold on. Nope, right here. 1988. When he gets captured in 1916, he finally gets out of the imprisonment in 1988, almost 70 years, a little bit over 70 years. He gets out. Once he gets out, he goes into the dream world and he feeds himself because he's hungry. And then after that, he takes revenge on the people that captured him, and the people that fell asleep, like Unity Kincaid that I was telling you about. They eventually start waking up, and you find out a little bit about them and what happened to them. And everybody else around the world that was sleeping, they eventually wake up. He does something. He gets revenge to his captors, but he becomes very weak. The next story arc is him going back to his kingdom, where we get introduced to Cain and Abel. I'm not going to talk too much about them. And they finally bring him into his kingdom. And then once he wakes up, he realizes that his kingdom is in ruins. So then he knows he needs to build back up, or he needs to build his kingdom back up. But in order to do so, he needs to get 3 things back that were stolen from him when he was first when he was first captured. And that was a ruby, like a necklace ruby. It was his pouch of sand and his helmet. And he doesn't know where these things are, and so he summons these witches, which is actually plural, but it's actually a singular person. Right here. They actually come, and there are 3 people, but it's one. He gets to ask him 3 questions. Or he gets to ask each individual witch a question, one single question, but it's 3 questions because it's 3 witches. One of them tells him that his pouch of sand can be found if he talks to John Constantine from Hellblazer. Then he has to go to Hell and talk to Lucifer Morningstar. Then he has to go and talk to the people from the JLA, the Justice League. And what's cool about this is you see Batman right here. You see Green Lantern, and then you see this guy. If you guys don't know who he is, I don't really want to spoil it, but he does take his ruby. So that's the next story arc. He goes after all his stuff. He eventually ends up going to John Constantine. He has a nice chat with him, and they eventually get back his pouch. After that, he does go to Hell, and he meets up with Lucifer. There's a battle between Dream and another demon. He gets his helmet back. The story about the ruby, he doesn't quite get it back, but he understands what the ruby is about. Something happens with this ruby, and he becomes more powerful. And that's pretty much the story. I'm going to flip through this a lot. The next story arc, which is amazing, actually. I quite enjoyed it. This is him in Hell, actually. And this is the part with the Justice League. You actually get to meet Martian Manhunter, which is cool. What's weird is you talked about the Justice League, but you only really like I saw, I showed you Batman and Green Lantern, but when he goes and talks to the Justice League, he talks to Scott Free and Martian Manhunter only. And there's like a little side story about the guy that took the ruby, what happens to him. There's this diner scene issue, which is actually kind of amazing. This person is actually important in the story. You actually learn about her later on, which kind of ties it in. Because like at first, when you're reading through this, there's some issues in here that you're like, why the heck is this even in here? Why does this even matter? It ties stories towards, the middle of it and the end of the book, kind of ties these in, like a small detail ties it in. So it does make sense in a way. But eventually he gets his all his powers back. And when he does, this is him fighting to get his ruby back. He doesn't really get it back per se, but he becomes more powerful. Then he meets up with after he gets his stuff back, he finally sits down and he talks to his sister, Death. And that's when he comes to a realization that he kind of doesn't have a purpose anymore. Like, he got all his stuff back. He's been captured for 70 years. What is he going to do now? And he has a long talk with his sister. He kind of goes on an adventure with his sister, Death. I don't know why this is to me, but I kind of have a crush on his sister, Death, even though she's just a comic character. Like, damn, I just look at her. She's so amazing. How she's represented. Like, step on me. Gosh, she's so amazing. But anyway, she's awesome. And you kind of have like some character arc growth from Dream because of his sister. So after that, we move on to the next story arc. The next story arc is, before we move on to the next story arc, we get introduced to another short story that at first I was like, what the heck does this have to do with anything? Well, this little story gets tied in later on. After this story, there's a new story arc. The new story arc has to do, this is kind of what I like before I go into the new story arc. You're reading through this, right? And all of a sudden it turns sideways. And then you read a lot of it sideways. But the next story arc, hold on, is about Morpheus, or the Dream King, going after... So once he starts rebuilding his palace, his kingdom back, he has his one of his aides, Lucian, going count up all the dreams and nightmares. They get counted up, but there's 4 missing. And the 4 that are missing are... these 2 right here, this guy, the Corinthian, and then this is kind of like a planet type of thing, which is weird, but nightmares and dreams. And that's the next story arc. He goes after these next people, or these next nightmares, to capture them and bring them back. What's cool about the next story arc and stories is that the Corinthian plays a big part in it, but then they did a spin-off omnibus. He has 2 omnibus stories in his own. And I'm thinking about picking those up, actually. So, yeah, the next story arc is about him getting those dreams, or those nightmares and dreams back. So I'm going to kind of flip through that real quick. I don't want to give away what happens in those story arcs, so... There's this, actually this is kind of, before he goes after those demons, there's this right here. He talks to this guy, there's a story, this guy doesn't believe in death, so he doesn't die. And what's weird is, at first when I read this, I was like, why does this guy have anything to do with anything? He does play a part later on. This is the Corinthian. So eventually he does get back the dreams and nightmares. And then we get introduced to... She's actually pretty cool too. We get introduced to the Vortex, and she has something to do with another story, part of him getting back the nightmares. But then we start another story arc. And that story arc, it's kind of weird, actually. And I'm not sure if I liked it too much, but it kind of made sense. But we get introduced to a story arc of him... After he gets the demons and nightmares back, the next story arc is about him meeting up with all... Like, this is a little different story, actually. This has nothing to do with... this has something to do with a little story. Her name is Calliope. She's important, and she does play a little role later on. But the next story arc is The cat thing is kind of weird too. Like I read the story of the cat and I was like, what? But it does play sense later on. This right here is another little story, not part of the arc yet, but it plays a bigger part later on. It's kind of building up to the next story arc, the little short stories that I didn't really like. But the next story arc in general, this is a story about death, oh my god, is that finally all his brothers and sisters have to meet up. There's a story about Destiny. He gets visited by some witches, and he's told certain things, and he has to summon all his brothers and sisters. This is when you really find out about the Endless, who they are. And this right here is when you actually finally get introduced to their names. This is Desire. This is Despair. Destiny. Delirium. I couldn't think of Delirium. That's her name, Delirium. She's a little bit weird, but she's cool. Then you get Dream and then Death. There's actually one missing. But they have like a little gathering. They talk. And Death and Morpheus have this conversation. That conversation leads to him having to right a wrong that happened way back in time. And it has to do with one of the short stories, towards the beginning. So his next adventure is going back to hell. But when he went to hell the first time to get his helmet, he kind of... certain things happen in hell where Lucifer doesn't like him that much anymore. And now that he's going to hell again to right a wrong, he's ready for a battle. But when he gets there, something happens and Lucifer leaves. And when Lucifer leaves, there's the omnibus Lucifer 1 and 2 that sends off, that kind of branches off from this. And Lucifer gives him the key to hell. And then a whole bunch of people come to him asking him for the key that they should be the ruler of hell. And, he brings them to the dream world. You get introduced to Thor, Odin, a whole bunch of people. This little short story was weird, but it made sense. And eventually he makes up his mind as to who he gives the key to. He doesn't really make up his mind. He's kind of forced to give the key to a certain individual. But he finally rights his wrong, and the story ends. And then you kind of, it's just, in a nutshell, there's a whole bunch of story arcs and short stories in between, but they all get tied in nicely. And I really quite enjoyed it because it makes you think a lot, actually, whether you're religious or not. It makes you think about a lot of things. And I quite enjoyed it. There is a lot of violence in here, but not too grotesque. There's a little bit of nudity, but not too bad. But the overall story, for me, I enjoyed the beautiful art, right? There's a lot of reading here and there, don't get me wrong. But the story in itself was amazing. The art is amazing, beautiful. I just kind of feel like the story and the story arcs kind of dragged on a little bit too much for my tasting. I loved this so far. I loved it. I loved finishing up the first book, and I can't wait to see where it goes next. Heck, I want to read Lucifer Omnibus 1 and 2. I want to read the Nightmare County 1 and 2. I want to read just all the spin-offs about it. There's one more thing that I want to talk about before I get to the end. That's as much as I want to talk about when it comes to story arcs. I knew I was talking about story arcs here. I hope I didn't give too many of them away. But there's a story here that involves... Let me see if I passed it or... I did pass it, okay, so... There's a story here that when I was reading it, I was like, what the heck does this have to do with anything? These little boys. This little boy, there's a story about this little boy. And something happens to him. He's up in the attic with his friend. They're considered dead boys at the end of the issue. I'm sorry if that's a spoiler. But that also spins off into another omnibus as well, which I also plan on getting. And that's why I was like, what the heck does this have to do with anything? Well, like I said, it ties in everything kind of nicely with little nods to like, wait a minute. So it first happened to me when I was reading about, the very first people that fell asleep. Like, what the heck does they have to do with anything? But then when you get like later on, you're like, wait a minute, that's Unity Kincaid from the first one. And this happened to her. And this is who, oh, wow. It ties it in so nicely. So anyway, I don't want to give any more of the stories away. you know, and the spin-offs, because that's a little bit of spoiler already. So when you go to the end of it, there's only biographies. There's Neil Gaiman, Sam Keith, Michael Drenenberg, Malcolm Jones III. More biographies of them, and then it ends. There's nothing else at the end. I don't know why I keep this, the leaflets that come with it. When I first started getting into comics and reading and seeing reviews, I saw that the Uncanny Omar from Near Me Conditions keeps them. He says people keep them. I don't know if they do anything or not, so I'm just keeping them. So yeah, that's the end of the book. Here's the back of it. You can get a quick glance at it. So I hope I didn't give too much away of it. Next, let's go ahead and do my rating on it, and I'll let you guys know what I'm going to do with the book. Alrighty guys, so what is my rating on this? This was an excellent read, an excellent read. I'm going to give this, I want to give it a 9, but I think it kind of dragged on a little bit too much for my liking. So I'm going to give it an 8. I absolutely love the stories in it. Some of them you're kind of reading and you're like, what the heck does this have to do with anything? And while it does tie it in, you're kind of like, they could have done without it, you know, per se. So because it dragged on a little bit too much for my liking, I mean, Jesus, we're only halfway done. We still have another book to go through. I know there's a third volume of this, but I believe the third volume has like short stories and mostly about death. But still, this one kind of dragged on a little bit too much, and I'm not even done with it yet. So that's why I'm giving it 8. Now, as most of you know, if I give a rating of 5 and below to any book, I'm not keeping them. If I give a rating of 6 and above, I'm keeping them. Unfortunately, I am not keeping this book. Because when I first started reading comic books, I told my younger sister about it, and her and I don't have really anything in common. So when I told her I was reading comic books, she's like, oh, have you read this? Have you read the Sandman? And I was like, no, I've never heard of it. She gave me like a small little trade paperback that contained like the first 8 issues, and it kind of sucked me in. And because of that, I ended up picking up the first 3, or the 3 omnibuses. And the reason I picked it up in omnibus is because I didn't know she was going to have room for them. In my mind, I already knew I wanted to read them, but I wanted to gift them to her. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to gift the 3 omnibuses after I'm done reading them to my sister. Now, I know eventually I'm going to want to do a reread of it, and that's going to come into play way later on down the road. But in the meantime, as soon as I'm done reading this, I'm going to give it to my sister. Now, when the time comes to reread it, what am I going to do? Am I going to ask my sister to let me borrow the books again and read them? Or am I just going to let her have it, and I'll pick up the trade paperbacks and or the absolute editions? I might end up picking up the absolute editions because that's how much I really enjoyed these stories. They were very, very well. There's a whole bunch of tie-ins with John Constantine, with the Justice League. I enjoyed it so much. I'm a big fan of Hellblazer, John Constantine, and I got everything that he's appeared in, like Swamp Thing and Lucifer and things like that. So because of all that, I'm also going to end up picking up Lucifer Omnibus 1 and 2, Nightmare County 1 and 2 with the Corinthian, and Dead Boys Omnibus with the little short story that it kind of branched off from. So that's my rating for this right now. I can't give a rating for the overall story arc of the Sandman because I haven't read Omnibus 2 and or 3. So as of right now, it's an 8. And so like I said, as soon as I'm done reading the entire series, I'm giving it to my sister. But that's my rating for it. To go over a recap real quick, this is the Sandman Omnibus Volume 1 by Neil Gaiman. Hardcover, obviously, because it's Omnibus. Published by DC Comics, and it does have sewn binding. There we go. Actually, let me let it down. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope I didn't give too many spoilers away. If you guys liked the video, please leave a like. I'd really like that. It really helps my channel out. It only takes like just a quick touch of a button, and that it helps my video out so much, immensely. If you guys have any recommendations for other books for me to read, let me know in the comments. I'll definitely check out if I want, or I'll definitely look them up to see if it's something that interests me. If I already have them, I'll let you know. And if I don't like it, I'll just kind of skip it. But also, let me know what you guys think of the Sandman. If you guys enjoyed it, if you guys didn't, what you guys enjoyed about it, what you guys didn't. Yeah, I'd really like you guys' input on that as well. Lastly, if you guys haven't done so, check out my previous videos. I'd really, appreciate that. And also subscribe to my channel. That really helps out a lot, actually. I know I started doing this because of me, but I'd really like for other people to check out my channel, my videos, so they can have, so they can make their decision on whether they want to get the book or not. So, all that being said, guys, I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves. Stay healthy, and we'll see you guys on the next one.